we're going to talk about how to write code that does something sometimes and other things other times. So this is conditional programming. This is stuff we learned last class. So these are our Boolean methods in Giroux. So remember, you can call these methods on a Giroux to ask a yes or no question about the Giroux. Does the Giroux have a flower? Is the Giroux facing in a particular direction? Is there something, a flower, a Giroux, a net, next to the Giroux in some direction, to his left, to his right, ahead, or right where the Giroux is standing? Or is it clear? Is there nothing next to the Giroux in a particular direction? These are all methods that are going to return true or false, and we can use them in our while loops, but we can also use them in what we're going to learn about today, the new stuff. So we're going to learn about something called an if statement. An if statement is similar to a while loop, but where a while loop will repeat the body over and over again while the condition is true, the if statement will only execute once. If the condition is true, it will execute its body. If the condition is not true, it won't. But the body will only run once. So here's some comparing, contrasting. If I am hungry, I will eat something. Or while I am hungry, I will eat something. So in the if statement case, you will only eat something once. But in the while statement case, you will keep eating something until you're no longer hungry. You might still be hungry after you eat something with the if statement because you only ate one thing. So we call this the condition. So if some condition, then do what's in the body. Ooh, get out of the way. There we go. There's the body. Then we have a body. So we have the condition and the body, and this is our syntax. So if parentheses some condition, curly braces, some body, and the body can be multiple lines of code. A couple things to note, and this also goes for the while loops. There's no semicolon at the end of the if statement header, right? It's just the parentheses, no semicolon, and then you've got these curly braces. You got to have those curly braces to put all that code so we know what code belongs to the if statement and what code doesn't belong to the if statement. And this body will only run if the condition is true. If the condition is false, then we ignore the body and we just do whatever comes after it. So here's some code using this syntax. So if Bill, the Giroux, has a net ahead of him, so Bill that is not ahead, then Bill will toss a flower because there's a net and flowers destroy nets. If there isn't a net ahead of Bill, then he won't toss a flower, but this will only happen the one time. And then Bill will hop, no matter what. So the hop isn't part of the if statement. So Bill will always hop, regardless of whether there was a net or not ahead of him. So if this is false, these slides are in the backward drawer. Let's go here. Here in this example, Bill is the arrow, and there's a net in front of him. So this is a true statement. Bill that is not ahead. That's true. There's a net ahead of Bill. So Bill is going to toss a flower. In this example, there is not a net ahead of Bill, right? There's a grass in front of Bill, and then there's a net ahead of that. But this if statement, that if statement over there, is going to be false because there is not a net ahead of Bill right now. So we don't do the toss. We skip the body and we go straight to the hop. Okay, so Bill would always hop. When it's true, he tosses and then hops. When it's false, he just hops. And I'm gonna show you this outside of the slides here. So this is, let me rewind, the same code. I can make this bigger. So you can read that. Okay, so this is the same code from the slides here. And when I run this, I'm going to step through. So the first line creates my Giroux, and I gave him one flower just in case there's a net. The if statement's going to check, is there a net ahead of Bill? And currently, yes, there is. So that's a true statement. So we go ahead and we execute bill.toss. and Bill tosses his flower at the net, it goes away, and then we do Bill.hop, and Bill hops forward. So to show you the difference between this and a while loop, I'm going to add a couple more nets. Because if this was a while loop, Bill would keep tossing nets as long as there was a net ahead of him, right? He'd keep tossing at them. I guess that, well, we'll see. It still won't work because it's an if statement. So he tosses his flower, and then he goes to the hop. Even if that was a while loop, I think now looking at it, he also wouldn't have kept going. Let me show you what happens when it's false, though. So I'm going to go through here, turn some of these into grass. So now, when Bill starts, now we're in the situation where there's not a net ahead of Bill. There's grass ahead of Bill because ahead only looks one space. So this is a false statement in our if statement, which means we will skip over Bill.toss and we go straight down to Bill.hop, and then he hops and never tosses the flower. So the if statement, if it's true, you run the body. If it's false, you just skip it, and then you just continue on afterwards. We can do a little bit more with an if statement. We can add an else condition to an if statement. So instead of saying, if this is true, do something. If it's not true, don't do that. We can say, if this is true, do body number 1, else if it's false, do body number 2. So instead of saying either do this or don't do this, we can say do this or do this other thing, one or the other. So in this example, I'm adding the else statement. And notice the syntax for this. So your if part is the same. If parentheses, condition inside, curly bracket with your body. And then we say else, no parentheses, no condition, no semicolon, just ELSE. That's it. Curly bracket. And then in between the curly brackets, you have some other code. And so you're going to do either body 1 or body 2. One of those will happen, but not both of them, depending on the condition. So here we're saying, if there's a net ahead of Bill, Bill will toss his flower. Otherwise, he will hop. So he will either toss or hop, but he won't do both. So let's look at that real quick in Drew. So now I'm going to change this. Instead of saying toss and then hop down here, I'm going to put the else statement. So I just write else and nothing else. Add my curly braces, and Bill.hop is inside. To reset the island, and let's look at what happens in this example right now. So we make our Drew, we check our if statement. If there's a net ahead, false, there's no net ahead. So what's going to happen is we're going to go to the else statement, and Bill's going to hop. So he hops. Now, if I go through here and I add a net in front of him, now when I run this, I make my Drew, we check if there's a net ahead. Yes, there is. So it's a true statement. So Bill is going to toss his flower. Now the net goes away. And the next thing that happens, because we just tossed, is it's going to just skip to the end of the code. Really, there's nothing after the if and else. And he doesn't do anything else. I'll add something here so we can kind of see what's happening. I'm going to add a turn. Bill.turn right. So now I'm going to run it. He checks, is there a net ahead? Yes, there is. So he throws his flower, and then it skips over the else because the if condition was true. Well, let's have him toss. The if condition was true, so the next thing we do is turn. Boom, turn. We didn't do the hop because the hop would only happen if there wasn't a net initially there. So we can see that if I put grass right there, rewind, run. So now, again, it's a false statement because I removed the net from the map. There's no net ahead of Bill. So we do the else, he hops, and then we do the turn because that's not inside the if or the else. All right. Is there anything else that we can do with an if and or else statement? I don't know. Let's check the slides. We can put an if statement inside of another if statement. That's cool. This is called nesting. And what this gets you is, in order to run this body, both of the conditions have to be true. So if condition 1 is true, then we'll check condition 2. If condition 2 is true, then we'll run the body. If condition 1 was false, then we'll just skip all of this. We won't even check condition 2. If condition 1 is true, but condition 2 is false, then we won't run the body. So both condition 1 and condition 2 have to be true for the body to execute. So looking at this code, if there's a net ahead of Bill and Bill has a flower, then Bill will toss the flower. But if one of those isn't true, either one of them, then Bill won't do anything. So let's check that out real quick in the Drew. So here I'm going to get rid of all that. We're going to add if Bill.has flower, no semicolon, but yes, curly braces. Excuse me. So let's rewind it. Let's put net right there. So when I run this, Bill has a flower because I create Bill with 1 flower in the constructor. There is a net ahead of Bill. Then we check, does he have a flower? Yes, he does. So Bill's going to toss his flower. There he goes. But if I rewind this, and let's say I make it so he starts with 0 flowers. Now when I run, is there a net ahead? Yes. Does he have a flower? No. So it just skips over. And the code is done because he didn't have a flower, so we didn't toss it. What if I rewind it and we give him the flower, but we get rid of the net? So the net is not ahead of him. So now when I run it, Bill has a flower. We check, is there a net ahead? No, there's not. So that's false. And then the code just ends. It didn't even check if he had a flower because that's inside of the net if statement, and the net if statement was false, so we didn't bother checking. So both of these have to be true in order to run that body. It's a way to check multiple conditions at once. And we call that nesting because you nest. The outer if statement is like a nest, and the inner if statement's going in the nest. All right, so now you're going to use if statements to solve a couple labs, and that is what we have to do today. So enjoy that, have fun, and write some code.